How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees. Since we have last spoke, the Yankees have made a ridiculously amazing signing in Carlos Rodon. This is what we've been waiting for, right? The Yankees had an opportunity to create one of the best rotations in baseball, and they've done just that by adding Rodon. And in my opinion, it's a really good deal. 6 years, 162 million, 27 million per season. They gave him the extra year, sixth year, and reduced the year-over-year salary. We thought it was going to be around 30 million. They managed to knock off 3 million. So a little bit more cash flow in the future. He'll be 36 years old when this deal expires. Looking at what Jacob deGrom is doing, looking at, or rather kind of the injury, but he's still obviously extremely effective and probably the best pitcher in baseball when he is healthy. Look at what Justin Verlander is doing at 39 years old. A lot of starting pitchers are having very, very good mid to late 30s careers. And I think Rodon can do the same thing. 2 consecutive seasons, minimum 130 innings rather, 178 innings in 2022. He's proven that longevity issues are kind of in the past. They're a little bit behind him. So I'm extremely excited to see what they can do with him moving forward, how they manage his workload, but also the quality he brings to the table. Ryan, how are you feeling after this insane signing?
Yeah, so here's how I view the Carlos Rodon signing. All right, the Yankees had I've talked about this a little. I actually made a short, literally like maybe an hour before Rodon signed, discussing the Yankees struggled to pitch against the Astros in the last postseason. They had a 329 WOBA allowed, which if you want to look at weighted on base average last season, that's DJ LeMahieu's weighted on base average from last season. And we can talk about his injuries, but LeMahieu was objectively a good hitter. We I think we can all say that if LeMahieu last year was ready for the postseason, the Yankees would have had a pretty solid hitter added to the fold versus a 294 WOBA, which is what the Astros had against everyone else in the postseason. That's Whit Merrifield, that's Aaron Hicks type stuff. And if you remember from last year, Aaron Hicks was not very good at the plate. So we're talking about a pretty massive swing. The Astros hit the Yankees pitching staff very well. And I think Carlos Rodon gives them, more security in the rotation. One of those 5 guys are going to struggle this season. That's just baseball, right? Last year, Garrett Cole didn't necessarily struggle, but he didn't have his best season. It wasn't, a Garrett Cole-like season. Frankie Montas came over and he struggled. You had issues with Cortez down the stretch with his groin in that postseason series. So you're going to have issues at some point with one of these 5 guys. And by adding Rodon to the fold, that doesn't mean that Rodon's invincible, that he's not going to get hurt or nothing can happen to him or he can't have any regression. It just means that you have another talented pitcher added to the fold and that, you've stretched out your rotation. The Yankees are in a position where Frankie Montas is their 5 starter. Frankie Montas is a top 35 pitcher in baseball. So your worst starter is probably a 2 or a 3 on a very good rotation. And I'm looking at, other comparable rotations. You look at the Mets, you look at the Astros, you look at the Rays, right? These are very strong rotations. They don't roster a pitcher better than our number 2, right? They don't roster a pitcher better than Carlos Rodon. And that's not being, a Yankee boy. Let's just look at the objective numbers here. Carlos Rodon is 3rd in FWAR, only behind Corbin Burns and Sandy Alcantara since 2021. He's 5th in ERA, 1st in FIP, 3rd in skill interactive ERA, 4th in strikeout to walk rate. And what typically happens with power pitchers is they give up a lot of home runs. Not Carlos Rodon. Carlos Rodon has the 7th best home run per 9 rate amongst all starting pitchers. Again, all this is minimum 200 innings pitched since 2021. So it's not excluding, guys who maybe got hurt in 2022 and didn't pitch as much. It doesn't exclude that many guys. I guess the only notable pitcher that gets excluded here is deGrom. But we all kind of assume he's the best pitcher in baseball. Projections love Rodon. They view him as a top 3 starter in ERA and FIP for next season. It's really hard to paint a picture where Carlos Rodon isn't as good as Garrett Cole, and having a pitcher as good as Garrett Cole added to the mix, you're just taking yourself to a whole nother level. Yes, the Yankees need a left fielder. Yes, the Yankees need, their young guys to step up at the plate. But the Yankees also need to make sure that they pitch very well in the postseason. They can't have a situation where, they score 5 runs in game 4 of the ALCS and they lose that game. That can't happen. They can't have a situation where, they're starting Jameson Taillon in game 1 and Clark Schmidt's their fireman for game 1. That can't happen. That cannot happen to a World Series caliber team. That's no offense to Clark Schmidt, but in that point in time of his career, he's not ready to do that. No offense to Jameson Taillon, who got a pretty good contract with the Cubs, and I wish the best for him, but he's not a game 1 starter for an ALCS to oppose Justin Verlander. That's just not what those guys are, and that's not what those guys were expected to be. And the Yankees cannot have a situation where guys like that are back in those spots. And the worst case scenario, Frankie Montas is your game 1 starter. that's not a bad situation. So ultimately, this team is a lot more equipped to handle injuries, to handle the ups and downs of the season, and to handle poor scheduling. If let's say Game 5 the LDS is again right before the ALCS, your Game 1 starter is still a very good pitcher. So the Yankees are in great position, great shape to win the American League this season.
Right now, I think that the Yankees have not only just committed to Aaron Judge, but they've committed to their word, right? They told Aaron Judge, we are going to upgrade this team. We are going to infuse and inject more talent into this roster because we have World Series aspirations, right? Carlos Rodon, I mean, if you look at this rotation objectively, right? If you look at what all of them are capable of, now health obviously remains a big factor. Longevity remains a question mark. Severino, Nestor Cortez, and now you have Rodon. All of them have longevity question marks, I would say. Cortez pitched over 150 innings for the first time in his career, ran out of gas at the end of the season. Of course, Severino coming off multiple Tommy John surgeries, pitched about 100 innings this past year, looked great, but, did suffer a shoulder injury that knocked him out. I think he could have came back a little bit earlier, but, they wanted to take it a little bit easier. They wanted to kind of phantom injury him or phantom IL him and then have him healthy for the postseason, which they did. Rodon, he's had his fair share of injuries in the past, and of course the Tommy John surgery. That all seems to be behind him. But right now, if that rotation can remain healthy and pitch to their highest capabilities, if they can reach their potential, that's all we're saying. If they can reach their potential, this unit could be elite. We have multiple aces on that rotation, right? Rodon is an ace. Garrett Cole is an ace. He's the epitome of consistency, Garrett Cole. I mean, 3.50 ERA, but he was unbelievable during the playoffs. He was great. He was fantastic. The home runs always will be a problem with Garrett Cole, but other than that, he's lights out for the most part. Rodon, lefty, guy can hit triple digits with his fastball, averages about 96 miles an hour with his fastball. He's a ridiculous pitcher. Really, really talented. He can do so much for this rotation. He's arguably, if not pretty much an ace, right? Longevity-wise, that's where the concern is. If he had a little bit more longevity to his game, I think he'd be an ace. It'd be no questions asked, but he could be right there. Nestor Cortez, I mean, there are some teams in this league that Nestor Cortez would be their ace. You know what I mean? We looked that good last year. He was that awesome. If he can replicate that, you're talking about your number 3 pitcher as one of the best pitchers in the game, consistently. So you're looking at number 4, Severino at the top of his game. He's a guy that we thought was going to be an ace for the Yankees for a very long time before all the injuries. He looked like that in some occasions last year. He had that ace feel to him. And if he can continue to compound on that, this was the first season back after barely pitching for 3 years, and he looked that good. Now that we've seen him, now that he has experience, he feels good. He can really commit and feel confident about his arm. That's really good for Luis Severino. He could be an ace again. He could really get back to where we thought he would be years ago before the injuries kind of took over. Frankie Montas, I know you're a huge fan of him, Ryan. There is nothing in my mind that there is nothing when you look at his numbers. Pitchers like that do not go from three ERAs to 6 ERAs overnight. Okay, that does not happen unless there's something else going on. His velocity dipped almost a mile per hour when he joined the Yankees. He was injured. You know what I mean? Like, that's the only way I can justify what happened to him. Either they tweaked his fundamentals too much and they messed with him a little bit, or he was injured and his fundamentals were changed because he was dealing with injury, because he was fighting something off. If you alleviate all of those things, all those variables, and they live up to expectations, Frankie Montas is not going to look like what he looked like for the Yankees at the end of the season. It's not going to happen. You know what I mean? He's going to be healthy. He's going to be ready to go. There is no reason that I don't understand why people are so down on him. Everyone's like, Frankie Montas sucks so much. He's awful. He's this, he's that. I mean, Ryan, you said it on Twitter. If you have that opinion, you do not know anything about baseball. You do not know anything about pitchers. And Ryan, tell me why that's the case. Why is it that people that are so down on Frankie Montas, why exactly are those people just kind of just spewing nonsense? Because Frankie Montas is a phenomenal pitcher, and to have him as a number 5 is ridiculous.
Yeah, so I want to emphasize, if you think, I tweeted this too, a good barometer for testing if someone understands baseball is asking them if Frankie Montas is good or not. If their answer is he's not good, they don't understand baseball. Pitching is not, people are like his road ERA last year, his road numbers last year. It's a small sample, and quite frankly, Yankee Stadium is a bandbox for home runs. But for extra base hits and other things, it's really not that much of a bandbox. And a lot of that was influenced by an injury he did suffer. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say that Frankie Montas didn't struggle, or that doesn't matter, that data does not matter. That data does matter. It's part of the ups and downs of a season. However, even with not a great ERA, his peripherals were fine. They suggest he is still a below 4 ERA pitcher. Projections project him to be roughly a top 30, 35 starter. You can push top 25 if you really want to. I think 30 to 35 is a good range for him. If you look at let's talk about the four-seam fastball and the splitter as a combination on its own. With 16.8 inches of induced vertical break on his four-seamer and 3.5 inches of induced vertical break on his splitter, that gives him over 13 inches of vertical separation, alongside a pretty decent gap in mileage, almost 10 miles an hour in velocity difference. Driveline is a great company that talks about pitch data and all that stuff. They've discovered that, kind of the benchmarks you want to hit for your changeup. Splitter is basically a changeup. It's an off-speed pitch. And your primary fastball you want to have 10 inches or more of vertical separation and 7 miles per hour or more of velocity separation. Montas exceeds both metrics by nearly 3 units. So when we're talking about Montas's fastball and off-speed combination, it's already beyond elite. His sinker serves as a good pitch versus right-handed hitting, get ground balls. His slider is also a pretty good pitch. His cutter is something that I think the Yankees are going to incorporate more into the mix here. He has command of 5+ pitches. Those are 5+ pitches. They grade out very well. His cutter doesn't throw it as much, but it has some good velocity. It has some good movement for a cutter. He has command of 5+ pitches. 5. So, we really aren't talking 6, 5. My bad. I don't know why I'm counting poorly. But we're talking about a guy who has command of a very good arsenal. His command was the first thing that went with the Yankees. His walk rate went up. His in-zone command was pretty poor. His whiffs were down. That's a sign of a pitcher who is injured, right? When command goes, it's tough to command anything with a poor shoulder. As you mentioned, your mechanics get a little bit messed up. And, we're talking about a guy who, even in his worst case scenario, is still better than Jameson Taillon is, which I think is just all that matters. The Yankees just have a better pitcher than Jameson Taillon, right? Like, again, I realize I'm dunking on Taillon inherently, which I don't want to do. He's a great guy, and I think he served a huge purpose for the Yankees, especially in terms of making just a ton of starts last year. But it's very hard to look at Frankie Montas as someone who isn't a plus starter in Major League Baseball. Yes, he could be, maybe he has another injury and that affects him. That can definitely happen. But assuming health, which I think you can assume, as of right now, he doesn't have any health issues lingering him right now. You can assume that Frankie Montas is going to be pitching very well next year. If he gives you a 3.7, 3.6 ERA as your 5, that's not necessarily ace level stuff. And I know that when he was brought in to be the second guy behind Garrett Cole. But it's not really because of the fact he's not that good. It's because of the fact that, Nestor at that time just came off of June where he pitched very poorly. We were talking about maybe, he isn't the best. Maybe he can't handle the full load of a starter, or maybe he's kind of regressing a little bit. Nestor proved that that's not the case. Nestor proved he is a legitimate starter. Luis Severino wasn't around. Luis Severino came back. He was throwing harder. He looked better than ever. And then obviously adding Carlos Rodon, those are things that Frankie Montas can't control. Frankie Montas can be very good next year and still just be the Yankees' 4th or 5th best starter because of how good they are, right? I don't even have to mention Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole's Garrett Cole. The Yankees are loaded pitching wise, and you look at what they'll have in the bullpen come the postseason. I know we're looking ahead here, and the Yankees have to make the postseason first. But Frankie Montas could slide into your bullpen, and suddenly you have an absolutely gross, filthy, disgusting reliever out of the bullpen as one of your back end guys and giving you length. If the Yankees roll with a 4-man rotation last year, which I think is a big reason they didn't win the ALCS. They had to go with Cole, Nestor, and Severino. The ALDS scheduling with rain delays and just the weird scheduling in the ALCS with no off days on certain days, it messed up the Yankees rotation. They had to start Taillon in game 1. I think they pushed Nestor more than they would have liked to in terms of short rest. I think that's what caused the injury. They don't have to do that now, right? If everything goes wrong and you have to go to your 5th starter now, you can just hand the ball to Frankie Montas for a game 2 or a game 1, and you'll compete with anyone in the league. Even looking at other rotations, Frankie Bravaldez and Christian Javier are phenomenal pitchers, but I don't think it's crazy to say Frankie Montas can go toe-to-toe with one of those guys if need be. In your own division, right? Boston doesn't have a guy that I think is, better on paper than Frankie Montas, except for a healthy Chris Sale. Baltimore certainly doesn't have anyone like that. And Toronto, they've got 2 guys in Barrios and Gosman, but I view them as, slight as better than Montas, but not by enough where you're looking at a sizable gap here. The Yankees have the chance to compete with anyone, no matter who of their 5 guys on the mound. And that's remarkably important for a postseason series and for the regular season as well.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is the Yankees should, on paper, kick the shit out of the entire AL East. right? Because that's exactly what the pitching matchups kind of look like. We have better pitchers. Our 5 is better than a lot of the aces in our division. Which is aside from maybe Toronto with, Manoah and whatnot, but like it's definitely a good situation to have. It's always a good problem when you're trying to figure out what the starting rotation is going to look like and just where everyone's situated. So like right now, I probably have Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Nestor Cortez, Severino, and Frankie Montas. I think that would be my 5. I think that you could make an argument that Nestor Cortez and Severino could flip flop, because maybe what the Yankees would prefer to do is have a righty, a lefty, a righty, a lefty, and then a righty again. Maybe they just kind of chop it up like that. I don't think it really matters. Maybe they just play the matchup, or when you're going over the course of a season, you're kind of just going with those numbers on a daily basis. And, if those guys can maintain their health, obviously a very, very important thing. So as we said, the longevity of these guys has been a question mark, and it is a question mark. So how do you kind of work around that, Ryan? How important is Clark Schmidt and Domingo Germán? We talked about Max Kepler. Maybe they want to trade a couple of those guys, including Germán. But in the case that they don't, they just go out and get Benintendi, sign Benintendi, or whoever it might be, Conforto, or Michael Brantley. How important is Domingo Germán and Clark Schmidt to the equation in helping to mitigate fatigue for these guys down the stretch? Because that is going to be an important variable to make sure they are healthy and ready for the playoffs without like losing too much gas.
100% agree there. Clark Schmidt, I think particularly, is someone who's going to finally get an opportunity to make more than like 2 starts at the major league level in a given season, which I think is important for his development. I don't think he'll ever get the chance to be a full-time starter with the Yankees just because, they have so much starting pitching depth. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe he goes out next year and one of those guys get hurt. He pitched very well. Montas and Severino are free agents at the end of the season, so maybe something like that gives him a chance to start full-time. But, Schmidt's going to have to learn how to balance being a reliever and a starter and always kind of just being ready at a moment's notice. It's a tough role to be in. Don't get me wrong, not really knowing what your role is, but I think Schmidt can thrive in that. Look at what Michael King was in 2021. That was kind of his first, year establishing himself as a force in that Yankee bullpen before his breakout, true breakout in 2022. I think we could look at 2022 as that pivotal year for Clark Schmidt. He figured some things out with his slider. He figured some stuff out. I don't think he's going to go out next year and, have a 2-something ER, a 2.2 ERA out of the bullpen like Michael King did. But he can certainly, take that next step, figuring out, his fastballs, at least his sinker and 4-seamer, those haven't been great pitches for him traditionally in his career. I think figuring out what the role of his sinker is in his arsenal and kind of honing that and perfecting that could definitely go a long way for him. And then I look at Domingo Germán. He's a lot less experienced in the bullpen in terms of recent years. I do think Germán gets moved. And the reason for that is, yes, Germán is, I've had my problems with Germán, and I'm not even going to delve into the off the field stuff because I think universally everyone could agree it's a bad thing. What his off the field issues are bad. They are objectively bad. But when we're looking at on the field, an ERA minus of 102 suggests he's been a league average pitcher in his career. While that sounds like I'm harping on him, a league average pitcher in your career is valuable to someone over 2 years. That's valuable to at least one team. And he does have a very good changeup. He has a very good curveball. Perhaps using his fastballs less can help him. He had a bad year last year in terms of his strikeouts compared to his career norms. He's usually been an above average pitcher in terms of strikeouts. I don't think it's crazy to say that a team is going to look at Domingo Germán and say, hey, this is a guy who can be our 4 or our 5 with some upside, give him a full season and, give up something for him. We talked about Kepler. Even if the Yankees signed Benintendi, I don't think it's crazy to say the Yankees could move off of Germán. That's also some money being saved. He is an arbitration pitcher. And then he doesn't have options. Schmidt has options. And we talked about the Yankee bullpen. I think 7 spots are locked in for next year. And that would be Clay Holmes, Jonathan Loaizaga, Michael King, Wandy Peralta, Lou Trevino, Ron Marnacio, and Tommy Canley. That's 7. And you carry 8 relievers. If Clark Schmidt's your 8th reliever, Germán doesn't really have a spot. And you have to still move Lick. You have to still move Abreu. We aren't guaranteed to move those 2 guys. So one of those guys either get released and the other guy's getting moved into the bullpen. So what do you do with Germán? I think it's crazy and it's stupid to release him. I feel the same way about Abreu or Licky. I think they have value. It'd be crazy and stupid to release any of those 3 guys. So Germán definitely, because he doesn't have options, may be the odd man out in the pitching staff. But if they do manage to keep him, if they are able to keep him around, I don't know how they would, but if they are able to, the Yankees are going to have a very deep rotation. We're talking about Domingo Germán as your 7th best starter. That's a league average pitcher. A lot of teams don't have a league average starter as they don't. A lot of teams don't even have 5 above league average starters or league average starters, much less their 7th starter being league average. So a lot of depth, a lot of guys that can mitigate fatigue, and a lot of guys that can give the Yankees insurance in case of injury or in case of just a spot start here or there. COVID, things happen. Guys get sick, things happen. So you always need insurance.
That's exactly right. You need insurance, especially with the longevity issues that I referenced before. But it's interesting, Domingo Germán maybe is an asset they can move and save a little bit of cash, get a little bit of something back. We'll see what they do here. But again, very important to have guys that can mitigate fatigue. Maybe they go and sign another, kind of just an innings eater, someone who could just help kind of supplement those starts. But I think Germán probably is the best fit for them. He's a good pitcher. Like, he's not good. I don't trust him to be a legitimate starter in the rotation, but he's a good enough pitcher that he can have some spot starts and enough spot starts to really limit the fatigue of some of these guys who are coming off some injuries or, working their way up and starting to compound on success in 2022. But guys, I'd love to hear perspectives on this rotation. This is a brand new kind of feel for the Yankees. They have multiple aces. They have multiple guys who could literally, if they reach expectations, be aces on multiple teams. So this is a really good situation. It's always a good problem to have when you have so much talent. You don't even know where to situate them in the rotation. So right now I feel really confident. I feel really good. The job is not done. We still need a left fielder, need some depth at some positions, but a lot of really great youth climbing through the system. We'll obviously take a look at Oswaldo Cabrera. We'll take a look at Volpe. We'll take a look at some of these guys and the impact Peraza that they're going to make in the near future and what their projections are. Because I know Ryan's very integrated with a lot of the mathematics, the stats behind the projections of these players. And, what should we be expecting from these youth prospects? I think that's something that we should definitely be looking at because they're going to play essential roles. Volpe is going to get called up at some point. Maybe he takes over for Gleyber Torres. Maybe he takes over at shortstop. Peraza projects to be the starting shortstop day one. Oswaldo Cabrera, super utility option, can play every outfield spot, every infield spot. Could be a freaking backup catcher if you wanted him to. He's an energizer bunny. You want him on the field. You want him doing some stuff for you. He's going to have a really big role on this team. You still have DJ LeMahieu coming back from injury. There's so many variables here that we haven't really considered, but I'm very excited to see how this Yankee team unfolds and what they do, because I feel like there's so many players on this roster. There's going to be some trade. There's going to be something to move a couple of them at some point. There's just not enough. There's so many mouths to feed, and we just don't have enough reps to give out. So I'm very curious to how they go about this, and well, only time will tell. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to like and subscribe. As always, drop your comments below in the YouTube comment section, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.